I'm really excited to share this episode with you all. If you're a regular viewer of our channel, you know a lot about my dad by now, but there is kind of a little hole, a gap, if you will, in his personal history that we've almost never spoken of, and we're addressing it fully today. And that is the years of his life spent as a musician in a band in the 70s. And there's a lot of things in this conversation I didn't even know. I grew up knowing this was a part of his life and just a huge part of who he was. And when the band's not there, you're not in a band anymore. So I heard him play his trombone, and I knew he was really musical, but kind of never really got to experience that myself. Well, this discussion is with Jon Brand, who was one of his bandmates. Jon played the bass, and they've known each other for a long time. Jon is a fan of the channel. He's watching our Spec House series and enjoying it. He's got a lot of experience in other interesting topics that we didn't get to. He's a landscape designer, architect of some sort. I could be getting that wrong, and I hope to have him back someday to talk about landscaping, because that's kind of a fun topic as well. But this is more fun, and we're talking about basically the whole story of their band from beginning to end, and we've cut in some music from the band that will come and go at times, so you can kind of hear a little bit of the sound. At the end of the interview, we're going to play a few songs of theirs, just beginning to end in a row, so that you can really hear how neat the music is and unique. And by that time, after hearing this interview, you should have a pretty good idea of what you're listening to. You'll be able to hear my dad playing, and Jon as well. I couldn't be more pleased to share this conversation with you. It was really fun. This is a little different than our regular topics, and I'm grateful for that, because that's part of the reason we wanted to do this podcast, was to spread out our borders a little bit on what's kind of fair game, and this is a nice step in that direction. So without any further ado, this is Jon Brand, bass player of the Jazz Miners, with my dad, Scott Wadsworth, trombonist of the Jazz Miners. Thanks, Jon, for coming on the show. This is, for me, exciting. I've heard about you for my whole life, more or less, and finally I get to meet you. So.
Well, and it's so much fun watching the channel, loving the Spec House going up, in awe of what you guys, when you came out, that big announcement, and it was just, really? Have you lost your mind? and then to see it go from all the... It's just incredible. I'm sure I speak for everybody. We're just, wow.
So you guys just came from the Spec House.
We just came. We were Romulitos, okay, and then we came to the Spec House, and now we're here.
So what, as someone who's seen the videos and has been to the house, what stands out as what might the viewers be missing that doesn't come through the TV?
The two things, the size, because so much of what you're doing is showing us the detail of how things are installed, and Scott's talking about very, not minutia, but just stuff that we as laymen would never know.
The stuff your hands are on.
Yeah, and then the exterior shots. You're doing some nice stuff, further away and stuff like that, but you just don't get really the size of the project. And then when we were up there, Scott took me around to the front, because he had told me many times, he was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to do that height. And when you see it on the video, it doesn't look like that. And then we turned that corner and put our heads up and went, oh, I would not do that.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is basically the distance from the ground of the lot downhill to the top of the peak of our house.
There isn't much room between the face of your house and there. I mean, I had no idea.
So it's a classic thing that vertical distance is always 50% greater measured from the top than measured from the bottom, right? When you're up there looking down, it's a long stinking ways. And from the bottom looking up, that's up there. But that thing, when you're standing there with the rocks and the wall and it's a ways.
No, I had and I thought I had kind of, because you had told me about it a bunch and how you had really just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I, in my mind, kind of downplayed it. Oh,
Sure.
how it's a house.
Build
How
it.
tough, how tough can that be? But then when you look at it, you go, oh, geez, what were you thinking?
Yeah. I kind of forgot while filming myself. I kind of drive up to it, and I forgot to shoot a lot of like far away shots. And look, when I was editing, I started realizing I should have started every day with a shot like kind of pulled back and then zoom in, because it would kind of almost even define the day themselves, because sometimes a guy will be working on a spot and then all of a sudden like his clothes change and it's like, oh, there's a new day.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I kind of lost track myself of like giving the viewers that perspective. I just became so accustomed to, everybody knows what it's like here.
Yeah. Well, and the first thought that came to my mind, I was going to say, well, you can do that on the next one, but I'm going to counsel you, maybe don't do a next one.
Thanks for the guidance, man.
Yeah, you should have told us that before this one.
Well, you guys just, I remember that big announcement and thought it was a brilliant move for your channel, because you all of a sudden you've got a lot more years of content that you probably didn't even realize you'd have that much. So it made sense, but yeah, that had to have been a daunting. There must have been moments where it was wow.
There's been plenty of those.
Yeah,
and frankly, they're not all behind us, right?
Well, yeah, I guess you're right, but still, just
most of them are behind us.
I was going to say, just walking through it, you kind of go, well, I'm almost getting to maybe sort of the fun part.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
So really, what I'm hoping to talk about is your band, and this is going to be more of a historical sort of what's the term for memory lane? A memory lane kind of a thing.
Thanks for the memories, right?
But I think it will be interesting for the listeners, because this is kind of a part of, I don't know, the 70s that I certainly there's not a lot of attention drawn to this kind of little piece of music and culture
in the 70s for sure.
Well, and I'm thrilled that we're doing this, because so much of the time when I watch your dad on the channel and he's talking and doing all this stuff, I want to go, yeah, but tell him that you played at the White House for the president. I think they would like that, So getting kind of seeing him from a different side is great.
Yeah.
Is great.
Yeah, by the way, so Jon and I did play at the White House in 1977 for President Carter, right? Yeah.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
So maybe to start at the beginning, first of all, you guys are the same age, I take it, or at least within
You're
a
1
few
year,
years.
2 years?
I think I was born in 57.
58. Yeah.
Okay, so 1
we're
year.
Always much older than me.
Yeah.
So you're a kid in the 60s, really, and then kind of teenager, adult in the 70s.
Correct.
So you're kind of straddling those two generations. And the 60s were obviously mega cultural turmoil and change and technology.
Yep.
And then the 70s, what was that like, I guess, kind of as high school and moving into this in the 70s?
Well, the funny thing is for me, and I think Scott's probably different, but I grew up, watching Beatles cartoons.
Yep.
I wanted to be Paul McCartney. That was what I wanted to do, and so all of my musical experience, almost all of my musical experience, was either classical music in orchestras, in junior high school and high school, or listening to the radio. So the rock and roll and all of that stuff was just so huge. It just overwhelmed the music scene. That's what it all was, except Dixieland Jazz had a huge following.
There was a resurgence in the 70s, right?
And so until I learned about it, I didn't know a thing about it. But once we got exposed to it, there was this massive amount of popularity in the older generation. Obviously, they liked swing. They liked, standards. They liked bebop, all that kind of stuff. That had kind of superseded Dixieland. But boy, was there a huge amount of people and bands from all over the world playing Dixieland Jazz.
So the festival thing was just spinning up.
Yes.
The Dixieland Jazz, traditional jazz festival was just spinning up about the time that we showed up with our little band.
Well, I think the Jubilee in Sacramento, which turned out to be the godfather monster of all Dixieland festivals in the world, I think 73 was their first one, and ours was 75.
Yeah.
So we were in that
first couple of years.
That third year.
So the Breda Festival in Holland, right? I don't know much about that. George Probert did that.
Yeah.
But I think that spun up right on the heels or about contemporary. There was just a thing. There was a Western world rekindling of interest in the music of the the teens, the 20s, and then fading out in the 30s. There was a little boost in the 40s in Northern California, Turk Murphy, Lou Waters. There was a West Coast jazz resurgence, and then it kind of bubbled up again in the 70s.
Yeah.
And so in the 70s, this is not like the young kids getting into it. This is the adults and the older generation who was kind of like
there were, at least to my knowledge, there were no young people playing.
Max Colley. Remember those stringy hippies? Okay, they were 30. Weren't they 30?
Well, probably.
Max Colley and his the Rhythm Aces.
Rhythm Aces from England. Yeah. Their bass player came to the Jubilee that first year, and he brought 2 pairs of underwear and his toothbrush.
Yeah, that's right. Fingers Williams on the bass.
Ooh, nice.
But so it was 30 and 40-year-olds that were kind of that jumped in and started playing.
Yeah.
Black Eagles and stuff.
Yeah, Rosie O'Grady's. Yeah. That's true. And there were, like the Traditional Jazz Society of Oregon, which is what formed our group, there were many of those all over the country, dozens and dozens.
Bubbling up.
Doing very, very well.
So that was
maybe walk through that. What do you mean that they formed your group, and maybe kind of walk through how you guys
So they didn't quite.
Kids.
So Phil Stiers, Rusty Stiers' dad, was on the board of the Traditional Jazz Society of Oregon?
Yeah, I think so.
And they had a declared sort of... as their charter, they had a declared interest in fostering an interest in jazz among kids.
Among kids. And fortunately, Phil's son, Rusty, they lived out fairly secluded. He had kind of a sort of a, not nomadic, but I mean he was sort of reclusive out there in the... So
quite a ways out.
He spent all his time listening to
Rusty.
Rusty.
As a young kid.
Yeah, listening to Louis Armstrong, listening to the Hot Five.
Because his parents both played with the Emerald City Jazz Band.
So as he's learning all of these songs and he's learning how to play like Louis Armstrong, he's getting the opportunity to jam with his parents' band. He's getting the chance to probably sit in at some of those early TJSO
like
things.
6th grade and 7th grade.
Right.
Oh, as a really...
And a prodigious talent.
Well, and that was just it, because...
And he's playing the trumpet. Right?
Correct. Whatever you're passionate at, you're going to do over and over again, and that's how you get talented. So that was how Rusty did. That's how he happened to become so good. And the same with the banjo player, Brad Roth. He lived north of Corvallis, loved the playing of the famous Eddie Peabody plectrum banjo style. So he just practiced, because there really wasn't a whole lot to do out in the country, that kind of a thing.
And his father was encouraging him. He played on the Gong Show.
Yes, he did.
He got some national recognition.
He did
playing on the
Mickey Mouse Club.
The Mickey Mouse Club.
The new Mickey Mouse Club.
As a 12, 13-year-old, another prodigious talent.
Oh, crazy good.
Yeah.
Do you think that music was kind of bigger back then than it is now?
Yeah. Live music.
Live music, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. And it was, you don't see nearly as many bands today.
Yeah.
There wasn't solo kind of stuff like this is. It was all bands, except for Sinatra and those big huge stars. But bands were it, whether it was a rock band or whether it was a jazz band.
So Phil was a business agent for the local musicians union, local in
That
Eugene.
is correct.
Okay,
you are right.
And so his deal was booking and overseeing the union status of the local bands, and there were enough in Eugene to support a pretty strong union local.
That is true. That is true.
So I'm going to jump and assume that this guy, Phil, who had the great
Rusty's
trumpet player son, is like, I got to get my son a band of other kids, and is that how it got put together?
No, it was really Rusty.
Rusty did it,
Rusty
man.
had this desire, passion, and drive. He wanted to put a band together.
Like in 7th grade.
Yeah. And so even though he was still fairly shy, he had enough passion to do this where he would contact people, or he would, I found out from Mark last night that Dale and Rusty were in junior high school together.
Yeah.
So that was where he kind of picked up our drummer, Dale Dial, from that. And then he went to Thurston High School and he picked up Mark Curry on the reeds, and he picked up
2 other guys, 2 older brothers in the first iteration of the band.
Oh, I think there were actually more. I think there were actually 4 of them. Yeah, the Robel brothers.
Yeah.
But they were like into rock and stuff, so they did it for a little bit, and then they were, we're not doing this. And so it kind of fell apart. He also had found this gal from Junction City, piano player,
15.
and kind of a barrel house blues singer named Lori Moritz, and she was gosh, she was so much fun because she just had this effervescent wit and this joy, and she used all of that to make people feel comfortable because she was born blind.
She was blind, born blind. And she dominated the keyboard and sang like she was 40 years old.
Yeah, it was, and it was so cool because I don't think I'd ever met anyone who was blind.
Mm-mm.
So when I first met her, there's that sort of uncomfortable, kind of like, okay, how am I supposed to act? Yeah. And she had a sense of humor, like she was one of the guys, and she fit in, and everybody immediately became just fiercely protective of her.
Yeah.
Just
and think of what that did. So you have a crowd of people at the Traditional Jazz Society of Oregon. This 7th, 8th grade boy had put together a band, including this marvelously talented, darling young woman, blind piano player singer, a 12-year-old kid who couldn't hardly pick up a banjo, but once he got it in his lap, he just completely crushed it. Rusty's playing about at 70% of the level of Louis Armstrong, and he's in 8th grade at this point. Yeah. And the rest of us showed up, and we're kind of doing okay. We're learning.
So how did you guys get linked up then with Rusty and his...
Well...
So I was down here in Roseburg, quite a ways south from Eugene. And, a traditionally much more conservative...
And you're also outside of Roseburg.
Way out.
Clyde,
way out in the Cascade Mountains. I was hunting and fishing and playing in the high school band, and that was it. And then Neil Hart, who was a local storekeeper, who also was a mentor to me as a carpenter.
Oh.
You may not have known this, John, but Neil Hart, when high school kids would come into the Dixonville store, he would say, "You're taking algebra, right?" Yeah. He'd throw down a quadratic equation and say, "Solve that." Okay?
Whoa.
Neil would engage with you. And he played the drums with the Oregon Jazz Band, and he knew my mom played piano, and he told her, "Lorraine, there's a kids band in Eugene, Springfield looking for a trombone player. I think Scott ought to do it." And then he told Phil, who told Rusty, and Rusty called me, and so I went up there to audition.
Well, what was your level of tromboning at that point? Because in a high school band, you're not playing Dixieland
Great question.
Jazz.
No, you're not. I had been taking some lessons, and I had gotten my technical ceiling was decent. I'd gone to state solo and ensemble contests, and I could play better than maybe, let's say, 85% of high school trombonists.
But were you interested in Dixieland Jazz?
Only because I'd grown up playing with Mom, all right, and she had kind of had a jazz-type church pianist, so I was aware of what improv was and playing by ear.
Okay.
And I had been listening to Oregon Jazz Band recordings since I was just a pup, so I had that music kind of imprinted in the back of my mind, and I had an interest, and I had false started a couple times trying to put a little band together at Glide of the guys in the band, and so I was hungry to do that. I wanted to play.
Okay.
So I went up there, auditioned. I had just been elected student body president when I got up there, and I'd won the Voice of Democracy script writing contest, and Rusty thought, well, he doesn't play very well, but he's apparently responsible, so we'll give him a try.
Yeah.
And so he taught me to improvise. How'd it go for you?
Oh, that's so fantastic. So I was a super shy all the way until my senior year in high school. So in junior high school, I was so fortunate. Our orchestra director, Mr. Royce Lewis, was a string bass player. Oh. He was the principal string bassist in Eugene Symphony. Oh. So there was another bass player named Jeff Braditich.
I remember that name.
And Jeff has turned into one of the finest classical string bassists on the planet.
Really?
And it was apparent even back then. So Mr. Lewis just was like, okay, you guys are going to do the all-district solo contest. Well, what was I couldn't say no to Mr. Lewis.
Sure.
So practicing, scared out of my wits, And then, I auditioned you guys for the all-state orchestra, and you both are in. Northwest Orchestra. Yeah.
Sure.
It was just, oh my gosh. So when I was in the 9th grade, he comes to me. That's when the 9th grade was still junior high school. He said, at Churchill, where you'll be going to high school next year, right now there's some seniors, they want to put a Dixieland band together. I don't have a bass. I think you should do it. So shy as I was, it's like, I'm doing it.
Hard to believe you were shy, but I remember when you were shy.
Yeah, I can't. So I went to that first rehearsal, scared out of my gourd. Never played Dixieland Jazz before.
What does this mean?
Yeah, but it's, I think they were chord charts or something, so you just read them. And so the first gig I played, we had what's the barbershop society, SPEBSQA.
The Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America, SPEBSQA.
Squad. So they had an event called Singingest Nights of the Year.
Yeah.
I think it was at the Eugene Hotel, maybe.
Probably.
And we played the intermission. That was my first gig. I think I made $10 or something. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a professional musician.
Yeah.
At 15 or whatever. Anyway, so fast forward to right after Rusty had gotten a hold of you, he had heard about Jeff.
And
Rusty,
wanted Jeff.
Huh?
He wanted Jeff, so he was reaching for him.
And the funny thing, can you imagine that? He called up Mr. Lewis. Just cold called.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Rusty Stiers.
That's what he did to me, too.
Yeah, I'm a trumpet player. I'm putting this band together. I was wondering if Jeff would be interested in playing bass. And Mr. Lewis kind of laughed and said, well, Jeff doesn't play classical or doesn't play jazz. Never has no interest. And he didn't, except he goes, but I have another bass player who actually has Dixieland Jazz experience. That, a couple of years with the Red Hot Mamas was the name of the band. So I got the call from Rusty. Okay, well, all right. And if I hadn't been so shy, I might have said no.
Yeah, but you couldn't say no.
But I was so shy.
You still have problems with that.
Yes, exactly. I didn't want to disappoint anybody.
Yep.
So
let me step in for just a second.
Okay.
If I have this right, he came to the first rehearsal from West Eugene to deep, dark southeast Springfield, like probably 25 miles. Okay, with a 3/4 size string bass on his. Was that a full size bass?
Nope.
Wasn't on your back on the moped?
Nope.
Oh.
You're close.
Come on.
You're close. I had a frame pack that I had my electric bass.
An electric bass.
With my amp bunching to the back of my little Honda 125 motorcycle.
Okay, all right. Put.
And to make matters worse, so Dixieland musicians.
Oh, just a second. With a ponytail. He had this long, stringy. Come on.
No,
back me up.
Not a ponytail, but I had hair down to my shoulders.
It could have put it in a ponytail.
Yeah, I could have. So everybody else in the band is very conservative, rural, all that stuff.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
We're getting together for that first meeting, and in I come with an electric bass, which is a huge no-no in Dixieland Jazz, but I didn't have my own string bass. And
That's right.
And long hair, and everybody just looked on Brad's Trad Jazz Today thing. He said, yeah, we thought this isn't going to work.
This won't work. Yeah, this dog won't hunt.
Now, to be fair, everyone was so nice to me.
Yeah.
They were just so great. And a couple of things happened within the first 6 months of the band. Mr. Lewis allowed me to take out one of the Churchill string basses to all the rehearsals and Jubilee and all. I mean, he was fantastic. And I got the male vocal lead in Hello Dolly, and the director said, you only get it if you cut your hair. And I went,
wow.
I remember.
Right. So one day I went from here to here and went, this is fantastic. It's so easy to take. Why haven't I had short hair all
Okay, now
this time?
just a second.
Okay.
But you did drive a motorcycle with your string bass on your back across town, didn't you? Or have I just got that wrong?
No, it's just the electric bass. Yeah, that would have been in deep.
But with the
deep
amp
trouble.
is kind of like.
It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
It was pretty hilarious. But that's you do what you can do.
you do.
But it was so great because Mr. Lewis let me borrow a bass, and then my senior year, that would have been 75. Our first concert was New Year's morning on 1975 at that hotel out by Coburg. Remember that? It's gone now. There was like a 2-story thing, and we played New Year's Day. That was our first gig, and then my grandparents actually bought me the bass that I have.
I remember
today.
when you got the new
Oh,
bass.
you still got it.
Yeah,
It's got some miles on it.
Yeah,
oh,
that's cool.
big time.
I'm gonna play some of your music after this question, but before I do, how would you describe Dixieland Jazz versus some type of jazz that the listeners might be thinking of? And and then we'll let people listen to it themselves.
So
I mentioned
you have a good description.
I mentioned this on a vlog we did, but Dixieland Jazz is polyphonous improvisation. That means you have multiple instruments all improvising simultaneously. But the difference between Dixieland Jazz and a more modern or progressive type of jazz is everyone is more or less staying in their lane. They're following a specific chord progression, using sort of the less obscure elements of the chord. Not a lot of 13ths, not a lot of ninths, not a lot of the obscure portions of the chords, which are actually dissonant, but have a prevalent role in newer jazz. And everyone sort of has a role that is congruent with the style. and everybody honors that. It's kind of like, it's reproduction music almost, except it's new each time. You're kind of restoring an automobile and making it just as nice as you can, except with your own interpretation of color and texture. And the other thing is, and Mark Curry mentioned this to me, is that it's contrapuntal, especially on the front line. The trumpet, trombone, clarinet, or soprano sax on the front line, they're trading lines and they're leaving space for each other, so it's kind of point and counterpoint and point and counterpoint, and it becomes a musical conversation, ideally, while the rhythm section is kind of staying in their line, doing their job with full range of creativity as long as it is sort of hews to the line, right, and is congruent with the style.
I knew you'd have a good description.
Yeah.
Didn't I tell you?
Rusty was the real super talent, and also
Brad.
Brad.
Yeah.
But what happened over time? Because I'm guessing you can't have a jazz band, contrapuntal, whatever, with only one
That's right.
star, right?
That's right.
You can't actually do that.
That's right.
And fortunately, as we developed and got better and got more accolades and all that stuff, that first year at the Jubilee in 75, they just treated us like royalty because we were the only kids. So it really fired our enthusiasm to put the work in. So it became almost every weekend
It was every weekend,
we would get there on a Friday night. We would rehearse super late.
At the Steyrs, Phil and Jan.
Yeah, sleep in, eat a huge breakfast, rehearse all the way until dusk, and then go home Sunday with the family. And so we put the time in. So
we started to get better, and Jon got better faster than most of the rest of us because he had a higher technical ceiling to begin with. Okay, he had good facility. Mark and I
would dispute that. But.
Well, Mark and I were pretty evenly matched on the front line.
What did Mark play again?
Reeds.
Oh, yeah, okay. Clarinet and soprano sax typically.
Yeah. And I'll just throw this out, that stepping into the genre, Mark came playing alto sax primarily, and then picked up soprano because that's the niche. I mean, an alto is not really that welcome in a real trad band.
Interesting.
A Dixieland band, yes. A trad band, not so much. And then, after he kind of got the soprano down, he stepped over to clarinet. So Mark and I were fairly evenly matched, and we're sidemen to this brilliant player, which kind of worked because in the Louis Armstrong style, as compared like to King Oliver, which was another New Orleans style, the trumpet is the star, and everybody's backing him up. And so it wasn't until we began to kind of catch up and actually learn to play something that sounded good and actually learn to play with some soul and interpret the songs appropriately and find our space, then we could begin to kind of not just carry water for Rusty, but make our own moves. And in the back, you and Brad and Dale and first Lori and then Tim Klein, when she couldn't hang, we're developing a really great rhythm section sound. Very cohesive, very tight, very inventive.
It was interesting when you say that because I remember one of my memories was maybe about 6 months in, and I don't remember where we were playing, but Phil was running the soundboard.
I remember this.
And he something you did with Mark and Rusty contrapuntally and he's like, they're figuring this out.
He looked up. I remember he looked up. His eyebrows kind of went up. He got a big smile. And I thought, okay, that felt about right.
Yeah. And I remember him saying that later. He said, they're figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of that you jumped over that hurdle.
You probably started listening to a lot more jazz once this started. You're like listening to it when you're at home and everything.
That's the key.
And remember, no computers, no internet, nothing. So if you had a record, you were listening to that record over and over. And I think Rusty maybe made cassettes.
He started making cassette tapes
because we needed to take him home and start to listen to him. He had made these little, we called them head charts, which was kind of a roadmap of the song, but it wasn't the song written out by any stretch of the imagination. So you had to know it to be able to follow the roadmap. So there was that learning curve. There's a funny picture. I think that first Jubilee, we had these, and Rusty didn't want to have music stands. Remember, he didn't want to have that because it would block the.
He was so
about
right on.
Yes,
he was right on.
So there's a picture of us playing somewhere where we've all got our books on the floor,
we're playing to
and
the
we're
floor.
all looking down. It's just like, oh, that's so embarrassing. But that was the level we had. That was the best that we could do.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's better to do that as opposed to get used to a music stand.
You'll never get off of it.
You never get off. So to your question about listening, if anybody out there is interested in learning to play jazz, probably of any kind, but certainly any kind of improvisational style, you have to listen. First of all, you have to learn to listen while you're playing, because if you can't if you get totally absorbed in what you are doing, you're going to derail the train. You have to be able to listen to everyone else simultaneously while you're creating the music. Not impossible, but hard. But the way you do that is by listening to other bands and other players, and identify somebody whose sound you like, and then listen and say, what did he just do? And listen to it again, listen to it again,
figure
and
it
copy
out. Yep.
Figure it out. Now you own that lick. Now you do it in another key and another key. And so listening is the only way to learn this.
So why don't you describe a little bit what that tour across the U.S. was like and how that came to be?
Jon
and,
has a journal.
And maybe the mechanics of that.
Oh my gosh. So after... So in 75, we did the Jubilee. That was the first one, and that was baby steps. Well, by the time...
An album in that year.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah,
horrible
never listened
album.
to it.
Oh, it's awful. So then by 76, the next Jubilee... So I don't remember the gal's name. The first night we were there, I think it was Thursday night, even before the Friday morning parade, we were playing this little club, and this gal was from the Sacramento Bee. She was a music reviewer.
Yeah.
And she wrote an article. The crowd was okay. Nobody knew who we were really at that point. But by this time, we were off book. So all of our focus is to the audience.
Playing to the people.
Part of the joy of what we did is we kind of egged each other on. So when Scott's taking a solo, we're looking at him going, yeah. And you've got all these.
We had rock and roll intensity and old people music.
16 to 8 or 14 to 18-year-old boys.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of testosterone going there. So she sat back and she wrote a review where she said, everything moves. She said, and I remember this to this day, she said, Jon Brand is like a rocket ready to explode.
Yeah.
And she said, you have to see this band.
Wow.
And that was the start of it.
Yeah.
I got to find out her name because that was so cool.
Yeah.
So that
cool.
Jubilee, we were getting... They were adding concerts. We were supposed to have 4 in a day. Now we had like 6. They were shoehorning us in wherever we could.
Yeah.
I played with guys in Southern California years later who, when they found out who I was, they said, I got a story for you. We were playing at Straw Hat Pizza. Our set was about half full. About half an hour before our set ended, the place went, whoa!
Filled up.
Packed. The fire marshal had to shut the doors. No more. And they were all going, what's going on? And the audience that was now up against the bandstand said, oh, the Jazz Miners are next.
Yeah. So
wow, that is cool.
Our musicality, 1 to 10, our musicality at that point was about a 3, and our energy was about a 40.
Yeah.
Okay. We just, and it was infectious. People just loved that.
Because most of the bands, really virtually all bands, one, they weren't young, but 2, it's a very... sedentary. Everybody sits and plays,
especially originally from the 20s and 30s, where they're wearing suit.
Oh yeah,
coats and bow ties.
And so this was not that. This was a rock and roll band mentality playing Dixieland Jazz.
Yeah, that's right.
So in answer to your question, so we made that 76. We did another album, Hold That Tiger, which was better.
Not
Still
good,
not great,
but better.
But better.
Yeah.
And
Rusty was great. Brad was great. The rest of us were hanging on.
Yeah, exactly. So we started to think, okay, what's next? And Tony Otten and Sherry Otten were the president and vice president of the Jazz Society.
She was a secretary.
Secretary, that's right. And so they said, well, what if we contact all of these jazz societies all over the United States for the summer of 77? Maybe we could put together an actual tour. So they started doing that, and sure enough, all these jazz societies which had heard about us or had seen us at Sacramento, that kind of thing, they knew who we were, and they're like, absolutely, if they come, we will have them there. We got a concert at Disney World that actually ended up leading to Disneyland. We got the Big Spiderbeck Festival, which probably might have been the second biggest or third biggest in the U.S.
It was a big one.
It was a huge one on the banks of the Mississippi River.
Biggest audience.
Oh gosh.
Biggest audience. Yeah.
That was so cool.
How big was it, you think?
They about 15 to 17,000.
15 to 17,000 people
all
stretched out along
the bank of the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
And they had this huge 1920s band shell, and it
That
was
is a ton of people.
Man, I'll tell you what,
amazing.
our first concert there, and Jon's journal's got these rich descriptions of what happened. But we walked out on this band shell, and we've got these lights in our eyes, and the sun's going down, it's getting dark, and as far as you can see into those lights, it's just people on blankets and lawn chairs, as far as you can see into the distance. And at the end of the first tune, every person I could see was on their feet with their hands over their head. And what does that do to a 17-year-old ego?
Yeah.
It completely screws it up, is what it does.
Well, obviously.
Look what happened. Yeah.
And that comes out in some of my journal entries. There's a certain arrogance there that leaps off the page. So that began to form, and then about a couple of months before, we were about around June, I think, middle of June, we were going to do a send-off concert in Eugene, and then be gone rest of June, July, August, and into September a little bit. Well, Lori, our piano player, who she wasn't really a Dixieland player. She had a solo career. She
like Bonnie Raitt.
She was that kind of thing.
This is not the blind girl.
Yes,
it is
the blind girl. She came to the decision that it would just be too difficult to go on tour.
She couldn't go across the country and back with 6 teenage guys when she was 17 then, or 16, 17.
Now, we briefly, there was a gal, her best friend, who was at Junction City and then transferred to Churchill, and I knew her. She was in the choir, and there was some talk that maybe she would come with the band,
a companion,
which would have been great because we were hitting it off quite a bit.
Yeah,
so that would have been a horrible
own set of challenges.
Oh my God, it would have been a terrible thing.
So just a second. Here's what we glossed. We glossed President Carter in March.
Well, no. This is part of it. Okay. So what Tony did is he contacted our senator, representatives, say, hey, the guys are going to be traveling the United States. They're going to be in the D.C. area in August. Could we get a White House thing? So they tried. They couldn't figure out anything, and it didn't look like it was going to happen.
That's right.
And then they called Tony in March, I think, and said, hey, we do this picnic lunch for the staff on the south lawn of the White House. I think originally it was like April 29th. It got moved to May 1st. I think that's what it was. Could you come and do that? Well, obviously, now we're going to have to fly out there and pay for that. God bless our parents, because they all
on our own dime.
They all paid for it, and it wasn't a paying gig, so there was nothing there. We weren't going to be in town, stuff. Yeah. But you don't say no to that.
Yeah,
all the parents went, yep, here's my check, no problem. So, yeah, May 1st, we flew in. We stayed at the home of the Wallers, who I think were they're the Jazz Society.
Yeah, and she had been a secretary to several presidents.
Oh, okay. See, now
she had
good.
Pictures in their basement of her with John Kennedy, and she had been a staff member at the White House for a long time.
See, that I don't remember that. Yeah. So we played a lunch out on the south lawn of the White House for the staff.
Nice.
And boy, it was so funny because we're playing along and we're like, well, I wonder when the president will be here or something. And Tim's playing the piano. He's got a little spinet and he's got a little bench. And there were reporters 6 deep, camera crews all around. I mean, they were just, it was... That the sounds of the click was just so funny. Wow. So Tim looks over, and one of the reporters has put his foot up on his bench and is clapping along, and Tim's kind of like,
gutsy.
That's kind of, and so as he looks over to shoo him away, it's the president.
It's President
Carter. He's like, okay, I'm good with that.
Yeah. So we just looked ahead, looked straight forward, and tried for tone, right?
That's the rule. Just keep playing. So we finished the song, and the president came up, and he could not have been more genuine.
He was so generous,
so nice. I think originally it was going to be so short that he was just going to have to shake Rusty's hand, sort of representative of the band. No, he shook every one of our hands. A little bit of banter, small.
He
talk.
said, "I wish that I could say that you are all my children, but I'm too old, so I'll have to say you're all my grandchildren."
Oh, see, God, that is so great.
Yeah,
I could totally.
He was a generous, kind, and small guy.
Yeah,
he was not big at all.
And then he posed for some photos and stuff, and then he left, and then Rosalind Carter, his wife, the first lady, came up, and she was equally sweet, genuine, nice. It was really cool to see. So so then the next day when we got on the plane and flew back, Tim was getting papers wherever he could find them, because on the front page of almost every major newspaper there was either a shot of the president with the whole band or a shot of Tim with his leg up, clapping to the music. I mean, New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune. It was just every single paper. Tim, you're on the front page of the Washington Post.
Tim was the young guy from Springfield area who was a great piano player in a more modern and swing type setting. He liked Oscar Peterson and I think George Shearing, those kind of sounds.
Yeah.
And he slipped into the spot that Lori vacated when she realized she couldn't go on the tour with these guys.
Right. That's
and he came up to speed so fast. And he made so many contributions.
Yeah, 6 weeks, but when he joined the band to when we went to play the White House.
Yeah, think of that.
Yeah, he did fabulously well. And one of the genuinely nicest people you will ever meet.
Nice guy.
So are there, separate from what you've mentioned, are there any other memories of specific show moments or concerts or even like licks or whatever that are really memorable? Or I'm sure the President one is right up there, but...
That's right up there. Okay, I'm going to tell one and I'm going to try and... I'm going to...
Be nice, Jon.
I will shade it. So our heroes were a band called Rosie O'Grady's Good Time Jazz Band. They played in, that was the name of the venue in Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
And
Rosie O'Grady's Good Time Emporium.
Yes. So then these guys were monster players. They were so good. In the Dixieland realm, they were it.
And they're 20 years older than you, probably.
30. Old enough to be our dads?
Well, some of them. Andrew Fielding, their piano player, was not too much older than us. He was mid-20s.
But prodigious,
Yeah,
pro-level, studio quality
Yeah,
music.
exactly right.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they were kind to us, and they just were great. As a matter of fact, I don't know how it happened. We'd have to ask Mark. But Mark started dating their band leader, Bill Allred, his daughter.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we play this. We have this set there in front of 15,000 people
At the Big Spiderbeck
at the
Memorial
Big
Jazz
Spiderbeck
Festival.
Memorial Festival, which is going on currently.
Like right now.
Yeah. So our big finish is Tiger Rag, and it's super fast, super loud, energy to just kill.
Hysteria.
Grand finale.
Yeah.
And huge. Just so you get this eruption of a standing ovation, right?
Applause.
Just incredible. Well, Rosie's is following us. They're coming on after we are.
Arguably the best band in the United States at the time.
Without question. As we're coming up on stage...
But we're leaving the stage.
We're
They're
leaving
coming
the
up.
stage, and they're coming up.
You're basically the opener for them.
We were the opener. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, he catches on quick.
That's good. So Bill grabs Mark by the shirt, and he says, I would rather follow...
There's no other way to say it.
Yeah. The second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, then follow you guys. That's what he said into Mark's ear as we passed. But it gets better. It gets so much better.
Oh, man.
So we're down by the side of the stage.
Feeling pretty happy with ourselves.
Look at us. Bill smiles, and he calls the first tune, and it's Tiger Rag.
Oh, no.
And it's 20 clicks faster than what we did it.
It's faster than we could clap our hands.
And it's perfect.
Perfect.
It was his way of saying, you guys think you're pretty good, and you are, but we
Watch
own
this,
you.
kids.
And we stood there. I remember this, like... And then we started applauding and laughing because it was like, we got owned and we're okay with it because these guys are the best.
Yeah.
Now, the audience might think, oh, the Jazz Miner's the best, but we knew.
Rosie.
Well, what a cool thing for the audience because they're jazz fans. So
Yeah.
they're gonna catch that. It's kind of like
Yeah.
playing like, I don't know, what's like the big Beatles tune, like Hey Jude, and then somebody else plays Hey Jude, and it's like, well, we just heard this song.
Yeah.
So
but
the audience caught that,
I'm sure there were a lot of people in there just like, okay.
So we got it. Was it Bob who wrote the review that nailed our over fat? So as we were going across, we played 69 gigs in 75 days. Is that right across the country?
I think so, something
like that. So a frantic pace, right? And we would watch for newspapers and jazz publications from where we had just been, right, to stoke our egos. And at one particular juncture, I think we were in Iowa someplace. We read a review from where we had just been in Colorado somewhere, and the reviewer said the Jazz Miners, they are over loud, over fast, and overrated. Talk about letting the air out of the balloon. And he was so right.
I know. That's the funniest thing.
So
I
right.
remember we were so up in arms, like, how could he do that?
How could he say that about us?
Like, oh, no, he nailed it.
That was about as charitable as he could be, right?
He totally nailed it. Because there was this energy and excitement, but there was always this we were on the edge of catastrophe because the whole thing could come crashing down,
Yeah, and Mark and I were always blowing clams. It just didn't get it all right when you're playing right well beyond your technical ceiling all the time.
And then you just accommodate by turning it up a little bit louder.
Yeah, a little louder, a little faster.
It'll be fine. Oh, that's really funny. It makes me feel bad for musicians in this day and age who are, getting it from their actual fans. So they have a rough night or they're not feeling great, and their fans are like hitting.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining, hitting them like, well, that was waste, or who knows what. But
Yeah.
that could
I want my money back.
That could get in your head as a musician.
Yeah.
It
Well,
seems
and we were so fortunate because, fortunately, we had enough enthusiasm and stuff to kind of make up for all that other stuff.
Yeah.
But in addition, these folks knew that this is the next generation, so they were so supportive.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could have been terrible, and they still would have clapped. You guys are the best.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate, very fortunate.
So you have done a better job than I of continuing to make the contribution to keeping the music alive. I mean, I just kind of got into a back eddy and played mostly in my living room and with Kelly and my kids, and occasionally with a little band in Wyoming and a little here and a little there. But you've stayed right in music for a long time. So talk to us about, I left the band and we knew we were going to go to work at Disneyland. And once I learned that, I realized I can't do this anymore for quite a few reasons.
So wait, let's pivot there and just wrap that up. So the band lands at Disneyland and kind of...
Well, it didn't land. We got
home.
back from the tour and we spent a year going up and down the West Coast trying to get into Disneyland.
Okay.
Playing from Seattle to Sacramento and go down and audition and just trying to, and just banging. I don't remember the name of the guy at Disneyland that Rusty and Tony were always hammering on.
But Sonny Anderson.
Sonny Anderson.
Yep.
And I think we just finally exhausted him. And he said, okay, you're hired.
I think actually Tony Otten had a lot to do with
Tony
that.
got us in there.
Tony had a lot
Tony
to
and
do with
Sherry
it.
are the unsung heroes in this little phenomenon.
And that means hired as like the full-time on park
Yeah,
band?
the original contract was, boy, it shows you how long ago Disneyland was closed on Mondays and Tuesdays.
Wow.
Is that insane? So it was weekend during the summer. It was 5 days a week, and then during the off season, it was weekends and party nights. So it was, pretty much full time, pretty much year round.
Yeah.
Which was
your contract.
Yeah, it was crazy, and it's it was like, I don't know, $320 a week or something, which was more money than I ever could believe.
That's a career at that point, right?
with full benefits.
Yeah, a real job.
Yeah, real job.
And I had when that was nailed down, Sacramento of 1978 must have been my last gig.
Yeah, because we went to the park.
You guys went right to the park, and I had given notice like 2 months before that. Guys, I'm leaving. And so they found Tim slipped over onto the trombone for a while before you found Seth Light.
Yeah.
To take the spot.
To take the
and
piano spot.
And I put you guys in a real bind, but we figured 2 months. 2 months was all the notice I could give you.
Yeah.
But you made it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it was
like pulling a finger out of a 5-gallon bucket of water, man.
Well, and it's so fortunate that sort of that Thurston pipeline, because Seth knew Tim from Thurston
High School.
So it was just like, okay, find another Thurston musician that we can plug in here. It worked all the time. So, yeah.
Oh, you were going to talk about carrying music forward.
Oh, forward. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I really, the Dixieland anyway. Not so much, because there really just isn't much of it up here. I play gigs with
now, but in Southern California for how many years were you playing? Oh gosh,
well, it was so interesting because I had, when I got to Disney, I had fairly recently made a commitment to the Lord, the first time ever I had committed my life to Christ, and I started to feel like, okay, is the band first or is the Lord first? It was
awkward.
It was terrible. It was 2.5 months of torture. Even my pastors at church said, "Are you sure about this? Is this really the Lord telling you? Because Disneyland's a great job and the Lord wants you to work." And I go, "It doesn't have anything to do with Disney. Disneyland is a great job, but I just felt like this is what I need to do. You have
time to make a change.
You need those moments." So I left in 80. And it was so great. Shows you how the Lord works. Rusty was really not happy with this. And I told him, I said, "Hey, Rusty, if this is really of the Lord, you're going to get a guy who's better than me." And Eric Messerschmidt showed up. And after the rehearsal, Rusty went, "Oh, I see what you mean."
All right, here's a big thing we overlooked.
Bye.
Here's the thing. About a year into the Jazz Minors, Rusty looked at Jon and said, "Jon, you do great on the string bass, but we need a tuba. So here's a sousaphone. Sousaphone wraps around you.
I'm a classical string bass major
trained
at
string bass major
at the U of O,
and a rock and roll
and playing electric
bass
You want me to do what? Add another heavy instrument? Oh, okay.
Wow.
I'm not bright enough to say, "Are you crazy?"
Here's a sousaphone that was drugged behind a covered wagon coming west. Okay, see if you can get some music out of this, son. You never played a brass instrument in your life.
So this beautiful beat up old brass sousaphone, and I'm just starting out. I'm teaching myself basically, and I just can't get a sound. I mean, I'm practicing and centering a tone. I'm thinking, is it really this hard to get that? Like Scott on the trombone, he's got that beautiful tone, and mine's just waffling. And eventually, after about 2 months, I kind of get it centered. Okay, this is the best I've got and stuff. So it needed to be repaired. Something broke or something. So I took it into the repair guy, and jammed up all the way inside of it was a ski mask. Some mom
I forgot.
Some mom must have said, "I can't take this anymore." Their kid was practicing and jammed it in there.
Tamped a mask in there.
So you know how a batter comes into the batter's box and he puts the lead weight on the thing to be heavy, so that when he's up at there, that's what it was like. I'd been pushing that thing for 2 months. That thing popped out of there, and that horn rored. The first time I played it, it was, oh my gosh, that's what it's supposed to sound like. So that was glorious to actually all those months trying to get that. And actually, it's really great because for years in Southern California, after I left the band for a period of time and just played in Christian groups, and then through some interesting circumstances, got back into playing Dixieland and stuff, nobody called me for string bass or electric bass.
No,
they called me for jazz tuba player.
Yeah, jazz
tuba.
tuba.
I'd play 200 gigs a year on jazz tuba and go, guys, I'm actually a string bass player.
Oh, you can play the bass and you can read. You can play some Vivaldi. So Jon has been down here in Roseburg playing in the pit orchestra when Kelly and I have been singing the Messiah.
Oh, geez.
Like playing all the way through the whole Messiah cantata on a string bass in like all 12 major keys.
Well,
right?
the thing that got me on that rehearsal for that is it's the main orchestra on about 8 songs. The other 30 are like a sextet or a septet or something.
Yeah.
Nobody told me.
Yeah.
So we get through the first one, and I just sit down and sit like this, and they start into the septet, and
Jason looks over at you
and goes, "No, you're playing too." I went,
"Stand up, brother."
"What?" He goes, "Oh yeah, you're part of it." So I sight read that in that rehearsal,
that's
all
awesome.
the way down, and it was
So Jon's a real string bass player, and you turned yourself into a real tuba player.
Oh,
got away from the sousaphone, got a nice
and truly love playing the tuba.
Oh man, it's
playing
it's
Dixieland,
so much more expressive.
Yeah,
come on, man.
Playing Dixieland.
And Eli
tuba.
Neuberger in the New Black Eagle Jazz Band, he was such a monumental influence on all of us.
And Dave Gannett in the Rosie's band.
Yeah.
Those are my two favorites, and they were just still are. They're both still playing.
Yeah.
How is it more expressive than a string bass or an electric bass?
Well, here's why. If you're playing string bass with a bow, like classically, then you can be very expressive because you can vibrato and all that stuff. But in jazz, you're just pluck, 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 boom, 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 boom. That's it. That tone decays as soon as you hit it. So there really isn't much you can do with it, and it's not. You're not supposed to. Like Scott said, staying in your lane.
Stay in the lane, man.
Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
So, but tuba, it's that beautiful.
You can do anything.
Yeah, that beautiful tone, and like Scott was saying, Eli Neuberger was a very traditional player, but he was also a piano player, so he was very melodic. But Dave Gannett played it more like an electric bass. He played like walking lines. He played
all
in the
over.
circus band for years. So of course he's going to have chops for days. So you were talking about listening and learning songs and learning things like that. So there was a song that Eli did called Cannonball Blues.
Oh,
and he had just this amazing
killer solo.
Oh, it was so great. So I just learned it note for note.
Ripped it right off.
It was so cool. So we're playing in Sacramento, and we had a reviewer. This wasn't that time, but it was a couple years later. And the reviewer, when she wrote, she said something like, on Cannonball Blues, Jon Brand had an uncanny grasp of melodic delivery. And I felt this big because everybody in the band knew, and I knew that was Eli's note
solo.
for note. That had nothing to do with me.
Well, that's how music goes, though. I mean, come on.
So back to your question about how is it more expressive. Instruments like that. So the word soul, right? So if a music has soul, I've learned to interpret that to mean if it can be heard as if it is the spoken word.
Yeah.
If it can be
Or
heard
the
in the
sung
context. Word. Yeah. Yeah, if it can be heard as if it's language, it begins to have soul, which sort of speaks to a real life, right? And a tuba is all about that. Brass, clarinet, wind instruments can be spoken through.
Yeah.
And so the whole contrapuntal thing of a front line sharing the delivery of the piece is all about, if it has soul, if you're speaking through your instrument, if there's questions and retorts and arguments and fistfights and duets and all these things, it becomes
I never
really
thought
interesting.
about that, but it's true with the wind instrument. You're putting so much of your actual human energy
Breath.
Through this machine that,
breath.
It would be logical for there to be more expressive
Yeah.
because you're truly all of you has to go into it.
More range of options.
Oh, that's neat. Now, just so the listeners know, you did not make a career I'm guessing in the 1980 you left the band.
Yeah.
And from that point on, has music been kind of just a hobby, or you had another career as well? So maybe kind of wrap that up for the listeners.
Yeah. I got out of music, like I said, because I felt like the Lord had other things for me to do. And I absolutely believe that by being faithful to doing that, he said, it's kind of like Solomon.
He multiplied you.
I'm going to give you what I know you need, your amazing wife, Bonnie, your 3 daughters, Abri, Brittany, and Hannah. But I'm going to give you that stuff that you thought you gave up. So from 92 to 2005, I was in a band that averaged 340 gigs a year.
Think of that.
Goodness.
Yeah. We played. We were the house band at Universal Studios. We did almost all of Universal's corporate work. We did a ton of Disney's corporate work. We did 40 weddings a year. We played the grand opening of Osaka, Japan, Universal Studios, and we came back a couple years and played there. We played So it was so funny. But in the interim, that period when I got out of music, I got into, at the beginning, it was landscape maintenance when I just started out, and then through a series of events I became a landscape estimator, went back to school, UC Irvine, and got my certificate in landscape architecture. So I had this sort of dual thing going on where I would work 4 hours a day or 6 hours a day as a landscape estimator for a big public works construction company, and then I'd go and play a gig, and it was so funny because the band in 2001 got cut back way back 350 gigs to about 180, and so I hadn't done landscape estimating for 9 years. When I saw an ad in the paper and went and applied and got a part-time. They wanted full-time, I wanted part-time. They wanted to pay me this much, I wanted this much, and so it wasn't going to work. 2 days later, the president of the company said, well, what if we meet you in the middle? You can have the part-time, but we'll pay you this. And I went, oh, okay. So I did that for a couple of years until the gigs went back up again. And so I gave my notice at the landscape construction company, and they said, well, isn't it just for the summer that you're going to be gone? I went, yeah. They go, well, why don't you come back?
Wow.
So for 3 years, I'd leave about June, the landscape company about September 18th or something. I'd come back, sit down at my desk, and start bidding work.
Cool.
Yeah, it was great.
Maybe each of you take a shot at this question and assume there's a listener who's really interested in music and really talented and young and trying to make it a career and become world famous the way you guys were. How do you advise that young guy or gal to think about their future?
My stock answer, first and foremost, is go to law school or medical school. That's my stock answer.
Okay, no. Buy a set of Occidental nail bags and work yourself to death for a third of the money.
There you go. So you have to put in the work, which for us, we were really fortunate because we got to do it in a band setting, which was a lot more fun than sitting in a practice room practicing. So, but you have to do that. You have to get the playing in. So whatever, I would say play all genres because it increases the likelihood that you'll succeed.
True.
So you're practicing, you're playing, you're learning how to listen so that you're not, so many players, they're stuck on the music. They can't get off the music, and you have to get off the music. Music's important.
Meaning off the page, off the printed music.
You have to be able to hear and play. So you do all of those things, you get better, better, better. You look for any opportunity to play that you can with any group. You stretch yourself. It's uncomfortable, but you do that as much as you can. I somewhere years ago, I wish I'd kept it. I wrote down, it was almost going to be like a little course on the things to do that really have nothing to do with music to help ensure your success. And once you hear them, you'll be like, well, that's for everybody. You don't be on time, you be early. Huh. When you get there, you realize that every gig is an audition. The moment you get out of your car to the moment you get back into your car, you are being evaluated. Be helpful. If you're on a bandstand for the first time and the leader's putting band stands up or something, help them. Be attentive, listen, dress well, don't complain, do the job to the best of your ability, be positive, all of these things so that the band leader who doesn't really know you well, you got to be able to play. That's a given. But then they think, oh man, that guy was great. He helped me with this and he was on time and he did so
even if your musicality is 2 or 3 clicks below someone else on the bandstand, you can beat them.
You'll get the call because the guy goes, no, I'd rather than this headache and a great player, which they're all out there, I want this guy. That's how I did it. I just made myself all of those things so people went, oh yeah, I'm going to call him. He'll be good. Now, the reality is being famous, there's not much you can do about that. But there are plenty of opportunities to make a living at it. You have to be in Southern California, Chicago.
You have to be willing to live where those opportunities reside.
Are. And there are tons of opportunities in Southern California. All of the amusement parks have music. Less than they did, but they still all have music.
Rusty's still playing there.
At Disneyland.
Rusty is a key man for the Disneyland entertainment effort.
Yeah. He puts that whole band together. He's got like 20 musicians that he puts 7 of them together every day for
Rusty's
that band.
Still the real deal. When it comes to music, Rusty is the whole package.
Does he play at Disneyland also?
He leads that band on trumpet.
What's the name of that band there?
Well,
they've changed their model
a whole bunch of times. I don't know what the name of that band is at this point in time.
But it's like the main street, like...
Nope. It's the one that's out in New Orleans Square. It's the actual one in New Orleans. So it's a Dixieland Jazz, which is, that's the music of New Orleans. So it's specific.
It's sort of a Dixieland Jazz band. It makes you think it's Dixieland Jazz.
It's better.
Is it better now?
Yes, it's better.
They changed from when the Miners were there and it was an honest-to-goodness, no-kidding band to a model where they could cycle musicians on and different instrumentation and everything, and it sort of made the people think they were listening to New Orleans music.
But they had to accommodate, so there's a band there probably 24/7, and like Legos, like just any combination can play these songs.
Every day out of that pool of 20, he's got 4 tuba players and 4 banjo players, and all like that. And it's like, okay, who's available? We plug this in, this and this.
That's quite a puzzle.
Yeah, no, it's hard work.
So. Now, the same
question
to me.
How would you answer that?
So my experience with the Miners was fabulous, and it shaped me. But I've always thought, and Mark was surprised to hear me say this, I feel like music cost me an education. Because I was at Oregon State, and I did not spend one weekend on campus, not one, for 2 terms. I was in Eugene playing or performing or recording. Rehearsing. And I came to the brilliant conclusion that I didn't need an education because I was going to be a star, Okay, and how many times have I looked back and thought, wow, that's really prescient, clear thinking, Wadsworth.
Yeah.
So my life's been great, but there have been plenty of times when I think, I should have hung with the engineering. I should have hung with the whatever.
Yeah.
But so I would tell young people, you have to be realistic about music because it is a drug. Music is clearly addictive. It's clearly compelling. There's euphoria. It's just such a, never mind the applause. Holy smokes, if you actually get recognition, that's a whole nother level of compulsion, right?
Yep.
And you get, frankly, to where you can't imagine living without it, okay? So your first answer is go to law school. Not a bad answer because it's like woodwork. I mean, people love to do woodwork and make things, and they think they need to get a job as a cabinet maker, and pretty soon you're making boxes for 60 hours a week for 15 or 20 years, and you lose your love of working with wood. And I remember Rusty told me that Phil told him, man, play your music because you love it and get a different job and you'll never stop loving the music.
Yep.
And Rusty has said, I should have listened to my dad on that.
So true.
So be aware of that, young people. that you love the music and you can't imagine why life playing music would be anything except perfect, except then, darn it, the music turns into a job. Okay? And so that is real. You can set your clock by that. So think hard about another cash flow, another revenue stream that will make you a productive, reliable member of society, and then keep playing your music for love. And there's real value to that.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
We all know, and the listeners know, how being on stage and the impact it's had on you, it probably really even just pointed you in the direction of like, okay, I can be in front of people, and it's paying off now. And what about you? You were shy originally. You're not so shy now. Do you attribute that to being on stage?
Yeah.
Got it.
Absolutely. You lose that fear, and boy, especially in the band when we were that age and that young with that much testosterone, it became. What's the word? A challenge. It's something to overcome. So we would many times go into a performance situation. The Bix actually was probably a pretty good one, where it's like, we know we can crush this. And we're going to do it. Nobody's going to get in our way. We are just going to destroy this crowd.
It became an athletic event.
Yeah, it really did. And there's all kinds of negative to that. There's all that kind of hubris and stuff. But boy, when you're young and you're in a situation like that where all these other bands have way more experience, they're way better players, if you want to really be honest.
They were just better players, except for Rusty and Brad.
Yeah.
We didn't stack up against any of them in the rest of the band.
No, they were all much better than us. But we just knew what we could do, and we knew what we had done before to an audience, and we were just immensely confident that that's what we were going to do, and we went out and did it. And that's why you get the over loud, over fast, overrated comments. People who could see through it and kind of go, yeah, you guys are kind of full of yourself. And they were right.
We may do this again sometime, because we didn't even talk about the reunion phenomenon and getting back together after 30 years and playing what that was like.
For you listeners, if you want to hear that whole story, well, we'll probably give it to you whether you want it or not. Yeah. So I'm not asking. I'm telling.
It's Nate's podcast. He'll do what he wants.
But two more comments. First of all, thinking of young kids who are interested in music, separate from whether they're going to make it a whole career, I'm just thinking how valuable it is for kids who are teenagers or young adults to be kind of focused on something.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like whether it could be skateboarding, it could be building computers, but just having some place to dump that energy that's not harmful is itself good, because being idle and kind of what should we do, that usually doesn't lead to anything great.
Usually
and so
bad.
Maybe if you're a young guy into music, just keep your expectations low. You might not become the next, Lady Gaga or whoever you want to be. It's the first
there's not many guys
I could think of.
Not many guys ever play the Super Bowl, but that's that's only football players you ever think of.
And that's and that's besides the point. There's other reasons to do it besides that. And then the second thing that I was thinking of, I watched this documentary a while ago about kind of aging punk rockers, and it interviews them, and they kind of all didn't plan for being fathers and adults.
Yes.
And then they kind of thought they'd die by then.
Yep.
And then now they are kind of thing, and still having to be on the tour. And that's not that great. And one, I think kind of the thesis of the documentary was saying, we were wanting to kind of change, this just really changed the topic. I shouldn't have gone here, but we were wanting to change the world and thinking the world is messed up, and that's what the music was about. And we should have just realized that being fathers and our family is way more effective at that. The documentary was called The Other F Word. It was really great. And I just loved it. And I was thinking about that because as young, energetic musicians doing these things and expectations, life kind of goes in different ways, but obviously those years in the band were just bedrock type of
formative
years.
And let me just say this on our way out the door. It has been it's been just an unhoped for blessing to end up back in the same part of the world as you and be able to overlap once in a while and occasionally play a gig and see each other and have moments like this. I mean, it's
so blessed.
Yeah.
It would be nice if more of the guys were here, because we would do more things together.
We would do more things.
We really were like brothers, because you spent all your time together and you experienced success together and being on the road together. So there's
building that, the hard work, putting in all those hours.
No, you're absolutely
and
right.
Fighting like brothers, and then having the conquest, which is what some concerts were, was a conquest, and auditioning at Harrah's Lake Tahoe and auditioning at Disney World, and it was was a remarkable,
we
remarkable
we
period
did it all
of time.
together.
Yeah.
That was the nicest thing is it's not just one, it's 7.
And Dale is gone now.
Yeah.
And so that has changed the dynamic.
Yeah.
He's got,
It'll never be the same.
It will never. The opportunity to get back together the way we did is gone.
Yeah.
And that makes me appreciate this interview with you today even more.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jon, for coming. This has been
Glad
just so
to.
cool. We're going
Glad
to
to.
put some video and links on the notes in YouTube, so we'll kind of direct you if you want to see and hear more of the whatever. You said there's something on Facebook, one of these videos? Or?
Yeah, from the trip to the White House.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty good.
We'll collect all that and put it there. I'm going to go check it out as well, but let's do it again. We'll have you back and talk about landscaping and then the reunion tour.
Yeah.
And thanks again for coming in.
Glad to do it. Thanks, guys.
yes, I'm blue. But I just won't, I won't be blue always. For that sun's got to shine in my back door someday. My back door someday. Trouble in mind, yes, that's true, true. And I have almost lost my mind. My life just ain't worth living, and I feel like I could just die. Feel like I could die. Oh. So I'm gonna lay my head right down on some lonesome railroad line and let that 219 train, gonna let that train pacify my mind, pacify my mind. I got trouble in mind, and yes, I'm blue. And my poor heart is just a beating slow. I never had no trouble in my life before.